Hi guys, I'm Ruslan. Let's get into this shocking story right now.
The night my wife confessed to 10 years of cheating, she gave me a gift. Not flowers, not a card. A shoebox wrapped in brown paper and tied with the red kitchen twine we used for roasts and Christmas parcels. She set it on the table between our plates at precisely 7:10 p.m., the time printed in gold on the invitation to our 10-year vow renewal. Then she sat down, folded her hands, and looked at me like a person waiting for anesthesia to kick in. "Open it," she said. Inside were 10 smaller boxes. Each had a year written on the lid in her looping hand. 1, 2, 3, 10. The covers weren't taped shut, as if what was inside wanted to breathe. I took the top box year 1 and opened it. A slip of paper lay on a square of tissue. On the paper, a room number, written in ink that had bled a little. Room 212. I stared at it and felt that tiny, unhelpful voice we all have whisper something I didn't want to identify yet. "Read what's underneath," she said, gently. Under the slip of paper, a Polaroid of a door with brass numbers, 212, a hallway I didn't recognize. The little white space under the image had a date written on it, our first anniversary. I looked up. "What is this?" "In a minute," she said, and pushed year to toward me like a dealer laying a second card. I opened it. Inside, a train ticket stub to the city where she'd told me she had a client meeting. On the back of the ticket, in her handwriting, "Every Thursday, book club, I told you." I felt something slide under my ribs and settle where breath used to be. She touched the edge of year 3 as if testing hot metal. "Start with year 1, she said. "If you still want the rest, I'll pour wine." I pulled the Polaroid back out and studied the brass numerals, like they might rearrange into our street number and turn this into a joke I could retell. "Who is it?" I heard myself ask, and my voice had the papery sound of a person trying not to bleed in public. She didn't answer. She reached for the corkscrew and the heavy bottle we'd bought for tonight as a symbol that we could still plan 10 years ahead. She opened it like a triage nurse. "His name is Eli," she said, very quietly. "I met him at the copy shop on 3rd when the printer at my office was down. He asked me about the book in my hand. Then he asked me how long I thought a person could stand in almost life before something inside refused. 'What did you say?' I asked, though some part of me knew the answer. Here were the boxes, and here I was, and the night had already chosen a language. I said 10 years, she said. We did not clink glasses. We did not say happy anniversary. We sat in the thick quiet of a room where someone has opened a door into another weather system and the pressure is deciding what to do with your ears. "Why now?" I asked. "Why like this?" 10 years of the word betrayal felt too short for what the boxes implied. "And you make it into a display." "Because if I told you with words," she said, "you'd think it was a story. If I show you the artifacts, you have to admit the architecture." Year 1 was the motel room where I had believed we ate cheap takeout after seeing a movie. She had said she was tired and asked me to drop her at home. I had, like a good man, like a husband trained on politeness and habit. Year 1 was a door she closed between me and the part of herself that walked down a hallway to a stranger. Year 2 was a commute I never took, to a city I wouldn't have minded if she loved more than ours. A train she rode with a paperback held high to turn her face into a landscape where no one could see the new country forming. Year 3 was a key, a small brass key on a blue leather fob, the kind you get engraved at kiosks in the mall. On the fob, it smelled faintly of her perfume because of course it had slept in her bag with everything else she carried: wallet, lipstick, the little mirror she used to check if wind had rearranged her hair into a person she didn't want to be. "What does it open?" I asked. "You already know," she said. I did not. I knew my wife's back like a coastline. I knew the small mole on her left shoulder that I'd once called Polaris because finding it felt like home. I knew the way she ate oranges, segment by segment, as if each were a separate argument to be won. I knew the way she breathed when she slept with her mouth open because the day had been too long for dignity. I knew none of this. "Tell me," I said, and sounded polite, which startled both of us. She took year 4 and pulled the lid off herself. Inside, a ribbon. Satin, navy, 6 inches. It could have tied a ponytail or bound a wrist. She ran it between her fingers like a person who knows exactly what fabric can hold without leaving a mark. "Year 4, she said. "I told you I joined a running group that met at 6 a.m. Eli took a job that started at 7. He liked to say we met somewhere in France, time zone wise, because 6 a.m. and 7 a.m. felt like Paris numbers Even though we were 3 blocks from the river and the best pastry was a croissant I ate in the car so you wouldn't know I'd already had breakfast. I looked at the ribbon and saw her hair looped back, the neck I had kissed 100 times exposed to mourning, to a hand that wasn't mine. You kept souvenirs, I said. That's a choice. Like a ledger, she said. Ledgers add up, I said. This is subtraction. She reached for year 5. I reached faster, as if speed could restore the physics of the room. Inside, a folded bar napkin with a phone number written on it and the words Thursdays, in a hand that wasn't hers. The paper had the faint oily constellation it gets when it has learned to live in a person's bag. Thursdays, she said, and put her face in her hands as if the word were a drawer she could close. Every Thursday for 9 years. If I told you all the other days, it would sound like a novel without plot. Thursday had plot. Thursday had a password. I stood up because bodies do not like to sit while their maps are being redrawn. I walked to the sink and turned on the water and turned it off again because noise felt obscene. Eli and I made rules, she said to my back. No overnights, no holidays, no texting after 10. We broke them sometimes, because of course we did, but the rules were the shape that let it feel like something other than theft. I turned. It was theft, I said. You robbed me of Thursdays. You robbed me of a decade. She nodded. I know. She lifted year 6 like a person lifting a sleeping child. Inside, a postcard of a lighthouse, the kind cheap gift shops sell in racks that squeak. On the back, in her handwriting, I told him I was going to the sea. I meant a square room to floors up. I sat down. The chair made a sound I had never heard in our house before, something between apology and protest. Why him? I asked, and hated that I sounded like a boy at a dance. He listened to the part of me that never made it home, she said. He asked me questions that didn't presume the answer was us. I asked you questions, I said, wounded by the smallness in my own voice. You asked me if I wanted salmon or chicken, she said, softly, not unkind. You asked me what I thought of my boss. You asked me if I would remind you to call your mother on Sundays so you could be a good son and I could be a good wife and we could be a good couple and a good photo from a good vacation on a good beach. Your questions were a house, his were a window. I picked up year 7. Inside, a compact mirror, round, scratched, the kind teens decorate with stickers until they become a geography of small lies. When I opened it, my face looked like a person who had slept on a bus. In the second mirror, the magnifying one, I looked like a crime. This is going to sound like logic performed for the sake of logic, she said, but I loved you. While I was cheating, I loved you in the sense that food you know becomes you. Your laugh lives in my bones. Your handwriting is the font my brain uses when I forget my list at the store. Your questions built the house I am still in. I loved you, and I still wanted a window. How long were you going to? The verbs line up like suspects. Continue, stop, choose, tell. When does a window become a door? Year 9, she said. I slid the lid off year 8. Inside, a Motel 10 with teeth marks in the cap. I hated that I knew they were her teeth. Year 9, she said again, and pushed the last 2 boxes toward me like a person surrendering a weapon. Inside year 9, a pregnancy test, still in its box, unopened. The cardboard had a crease like it had traveled for a few days in the wrong bag. Who? I asked, and the word almost fell on the floor. Mine, she said. Yours, perhaps, or not, it doesn't matter. It was gone before anyone could ask it to be anything but hypothetical. Did you tell him? I asked. No, she said. And I didn't tell you because you were trying not to cry when the nurse called to say your father's heart was learning a new, less promising beat. I felt the great, stupid tenderness of our life rush in to compete with the blood I could hear in my ears. We had built a house on a hill, and while I had stacked boxes of books and argued with plumbers and learned which cabinet had the good glasses, she had walked down to the motel on River Road with a window in her hand. I opened year 10. A key again, but different. The kind the bank gives you in an envelope with a number printed on the outside. On the envelope, in her handwriting, safe deposit box. Saturday at noon. Come alone. I looked up. Is this a game? No, she said. A map. Why do you need me to follow anything anywhere at this point? I said, and was proud of how flat it sounded. Because you deserve to see the whole thing, she said. Not just the parts I curated for my courage. Eli, I said. Where is he now? She looked down at the table, at the salt shaker, at the tiny ridge in the wood where I had dropped a pen last winter. Dead, she said. 3 months ago, Heart. A neat ending, tidy enough to hate. And you were going to tell me when? I asked. Tonight, she said, in a speech that was going to sound like it wanted forgiveness when really all it wanted was a witness. I let my fingers rest on the boxes like a person checking whether the stove is off. And if I refuse to play, then you put the boxes in the trash, she said. And I will move into the guest room and we will be practical and polite until we can afford separate apartments for our grief. Why not tell me the first year? I asked. Why not tell me when it was still a small fire and I could have put a pot lid over it? Because it wasn't a fire yet, she said. It was a match in a drawer. And then I built a drawer of matches. She stood, went to the sink, ran the water like a person in a movie who has committed a crime and is washing their hands of ketchup. She turned it off. She turned back. Saturday at noon, she said. It's under my name, but I put yours on the card. You won't need me to open it. What's in it? I asked. Proof, she said. Not to convince you I loved him. To convince you I loved you while I did. She walked to the guest room without looking at me again. The house felt like it had adjusted its foundation while I was in the kitchen. I didn't sleep. At 4:15 a.m., when the world is private, I opened year one again and stared at the brass numbers and wondered whether I had ever noticed the way she smelled when she came home on Thursdays. Saturday, the bank smelled like a justification. The woman with the key asked for my ID and asked me to sign a log and led me into a room that looked like a dentist's closet. Box 311 came out of the wall with the gentle clank of a machine that assumes money is simple. Inside, a stack of envelopes, on each, a year, underlined twice. Year 1, a letter. Dear Matthew, it began, in my wife's hand. I will not mail this, but I will write it because I need a version of you I can tell the truth to that won't have to react in real time and therefore won't die. I read until the room turned into a machine that makes the sound of air. Year 2, a receipt for a hotel in a city sheet said she hated because of the way the buses smell. On the back of the receipt, I am inventing a language for a life I don't know how to stop wanting. Year 3, photographs of a beach at night only black, the waves implied, not seen. On the back, every story I tell you about the ocean is really about us. Year 4, a poem I recognized. My wife had once taped it to our wall after a fight about a lamp. In the margin, I am writing in pencil because I owe you the option of editing. Year 5, a map of our neighborhood with Thursdays circled. Arrows pointing, 7:10 home, 7:18 Eli, 8:05 me. The courage of cruelty is to call it a schedule. Year 6, an ultrasound image, not of a baby, but of a heart hers. A cardiologist had labeled an irregularity we already knew about, the one that made loud bars a hazard. On the back, even broken, it holds. Year 7, a note addressed to Eli. I will choose him if choosing becomes required. This hurts to write. That's how I know it is a sentence with a subject and a verb and not just a gesture I want to make at the sky. Year 8, the motel pen again. The teeth marks were deeper. On the folded napkin, he asked me tonight if I wanted salmon or chicken. I did not tell him I wanted out of the shape of the question. Year 9, the unopened pregnancy test. On the box, in Sharpie. I will not put this between two men and ask it to pick a father. Year 10, a photo of me. I sat down on the little metal chair and held a film photograph of my own face that I did not remember being taken. I was laughing, head thrown back, in the kitchen where the shoebox had waited on Thursday nights for me to notice. I was holding a stupid wooden spoon like a man auditioning to be endearing. On the back, in her hand. This is why it never felt like leaving. I locked the box. I returned it. I went home via the long way, past the river that sometimes looks like it is thinking about beginning again somewhere else. At home, the guest room door was open. She sat on the floor sorting socks like the world had not rearranged itself around a safe deposit box. She did not look up. You wanted me to see two people, I said, and tried not to sound like a judge who enjoys their job. You wanted me to see the woman who wrote the letters and the woman who cooked dinner and the woman who kept the napkin and the woman who folded these socks and the woman who told a stranger in a bank vault that our life was not something she was trying to leave so much as something she was also trying to live. She looked up. Yes, she said, because I am. I sat on the carpet, the way we used to when we were new and broke and furniture was a theory. What do we do with that? I asked. We could burn it, she said, or we could build from it. Not a vow renewal, a consent renewal. What would that even look like? It would look like me giving you all of it, as it happens, instead of as artifacts. It would look like you asking different questions. It would look like you not trying to be the witness if what you want is a judge. It would look like me not asking a window to pretend to be a door. It would look like therapy, honesty, humiliation, grief, Tuesday night pasta, and the possibility that I will still fail and tell you before I turn it into a map. You want to stay, I said, not really a question. I want to learn how to live in only one house, she said, and the hope in it terrified me more than any box. And if I say no, then you are right, she said, and I will move out. I will become a woman who buys her own vases and talks to her plants and tries, in that smaller room, to make the window into a painting and not a root. We went to Leon, the therapist, who had looked at me like a person who had made it to shore without remembering to be grateful. She asked us a different first question than the last time. Do you want to repair, she said, or do you want to record? She meant, do you want to do the work, or do you want to make the perfect archive of how it broke? I want both, I said, too quickly. You can have them, she said, but not at the same time. My wife, her name is Myra. I realize I have been sparing you it, as if using it would weaken my argument, said, repair. We did the small, mortifying things couples do when they decide to stay in a house with scorch marks. We told friends in a controlled burn, in pairs, so the story wouldn't jump fences. We told our parents like firefighters. We made boundaries. Myra texted me if she felt herself drafting language that needed air. I didn't read her emails, because if trust is paper you can't get it wet and expect it to hold. We chose a night, Thursdays ironically, to sit on the floor and say the ugliest sentences. We made a meal that isn't worth mentioning here because the important part was chewing and continuing to be in the same light. We wrote a letter to Eli's sister, who had sent a note with his obituary that was kind in a way that made me want to break a window. We didn't mail it. Some letters are for the safe deposit box of your own mind. Once, 3 months in, I found Myra sitting in the car in the driveway with the radio off and her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel like a student waiting for instruction. I wanted to go, she said, not looking at me, so I sat here and waited to want less. Do you want less? I asked. She nodded, a small, grave motion, like a child promising to finish their piece. The most boring thing happened next and saved us, time. The most amazing thing happened and saved us again, time. I learned to ask different questions. Not salmon or chicken. Where did you disappear today? Where did you return from? How much of you is here right now? The answers were sometimes ugly, sometimes they were unprintably beautiful. A year later, we went back to the bank. The clerk led us to the little room. We took out box 311. Inside was a single item, a photo of the 10 smaller boxes, stacked empty on our kitchen table, their lids ajar like mouths that had said what they came to say and were not going to offer seconds. On the back, in Myra's handwriting, a sentence that looked like it had been erased once and rewritten. I am learning to love without a map. We still fight. I still find myself wanting a verdict. She still finds herself wanting weather. Sometimes, on Thursdays, we go to a book club that actually exists, and we listen to strangers talk about characters who make the same mistakes in more glamorous rooms. Sometimes, on Thursdays, we make pasta and cry over onions and call it therapy because money is tight and love is work. Here is what I know now. Betrayal can be a decade, or it can be a day. 10 years sounds like a sentence. It is in fact a series of permissions granted and stolen, a set of doors opened in small increments to avoid hearing them creak. If you are looking for a moral, I can't sell you one. I have a practice instead. If someone hands you a box, open it. If what's inside is a map, decide whether you are a person who follows maps because you love the scenery or because you are afraid of getting lost. Decide whether the window you keep inventing is secretly a door. Decide whether the house you live in can stand one more renovation. And if you find yourself in a kitchen with 10 years in a stack and a person you still know how to name sitting like a defendant and also like the only witness who saw the whole thing, do one boring, holy thing first. Pour water, sit down, choose one box. We chose all of them. We are still choosing. On our 11th anniversary, Myra gave me a different kind of gift. A small, flat stone, smooth with handling, the kind you pick up at a river before you remember you're not supposed to. On it, in Sharpie, one word, stay. I can't promise forever, she said. But I can promise this. Today, I am here. If I want a window, I will say window out loud. If I want a door, I won't pretend it's of you. We went for a walk along the river. The water did what water does, move forward while looking like it was staying in place. The sky tried on several versions of itself. The house on the hill waited, scorch marks and all. We opened the door and went in, not because it was easy, but because sometimes love is choosing the room where you will be honest in. People ask me now, because stories like this are call and response, how I can live with it. 10 years, 10 boxes, 10 words I never wanted to learn. I tell them something small and helpful. I haven't learned to live with it. I am living with her. The distinction is the difference between a map and a landscape. If you need a question to finish this with, I'll give you the one Myra asked me on a Thursday when we were eating pasta and crying over nothing and everything. Do you want to be right, or do you want to know me? I am trying, my God, to choose the second one. And she is trying, I can tell you with my own mouth, to give me fewer boxes and more days.